Hello and welcome to our new life, a life of masks, social distance, fear, interrupted travels, and distant homes. Can you remember the first time when you thought that aviation was about to stop? That our lives and our economy were interrupted by this microscopic and scary bug? Well, I clearly remember. A call that I received, it was late night on the 26th January this year, a few months ago. On the phone, on the other side, they told me, Frederico, things are dangerous here. I'm sorry, we are not boarding the flight tonight. That was my China delegation manager. 2 days later, I was shutting down the lights on Global Investment and Aviation Summit, held here in Dubai, with millions and millions of dollars of investment in the pipeline. Everything was great. The industry felt pumped. I felt pumped. I could not even imagine what just around the corner. In fact, very few did. The world stopped. Aviation and tourism suffered the biggest knockout of its history, and all mankind are now living through the worst economic crisis. It's fair to say that when aviation stopped, the world stopped. And even now, when aviation finance sector is gearing up for all this COVID-19 disturbance, when all of us are getting used to this kind of bumps, aircraft market values and lease rental factors are still dropping. Some airlines are still into survival mode, and others are operating with a small success. The fact is that we can't make a clear heading out of this massive storm. But the truth is that opportunities are also present. I still receive, believe me, and follow some airline startups. Yes, they are starting to grow like mushrooms because there are vital connections that must be made. These opportunities cannot be taken by current airlines that are in survival mode. New business models are arising, and that's why we are here on this amazing panel with aviation best minds loaded with data and experience so that we can taxi for a 30 minutes flight of reality check and opportunities appraisal. I will start to introduce Peter Morris. This will be my first member of the panel with the presentation. Peter Morris from Ascent by Cirium is chief economist and is responsible for a variety of projects on areas concerning airports, airlines, market demand analysis, forecasting, new aircraft, and product research. Prior to joining Ascent consultancy team in 2003, Peter was IATA chief economist and headed the IATA research consultancy department. Over the previous 10 years, he had built up the aviation information research department for IATA to be one of the aviation industry leading global suppliers of market research, statistical, and forecast information. Peter, welcome very much to our panel, and I will request for you to start the presentation if you have it in your computer, please.
I do. Let me just... Okay, can you see that? Okay, that's good. Well, what I want to do in the time today was just run through some of the what I call navigation aids that we collect to try and understand what's going on in the industry at the current time. This is really a crisis like no other, so it's impossible to do justice to the full depth and width of it in the time available, but I'll try and give you some indicators I hope you'll find helpful. Just a disclaimer. So what I want to talk about today is the impact that we've seen from COVID-19, the measures of the daily aircraft in service and utilisation, and something about the potential recovery scenarios. Just making the points about the business that I think are relevant here, that it's a highly regulated international business and facilitates a global $12 trillion impact across the travel and tourism industry. A pandemic such as this affects a number of different dimensions, one of which is the willingness of individuals to travel, and that's at the heart of it. So demand is systemically hit by something like this. You then see another level of regulatory control, and that's by each of the sovereign states, and you're talking up to 200 sovereign states worldwide, each of whom have different perspectives on what they should do and how health should interact with the aviation business. That clearly impacts the viability of the airline and airport operations. A secondary effect, which is as important as well in its way, is that we're seeing dramatic reductions in GDP in a variety of different regions, and that means that GDP isn't then available for travel spend. and its impact in terms of business travel, its impact in terms of freight and so on. And at its extreme, we've seen something like 90% or more of air travel having ceased in particular route networks. So turning to the recovery depends upon a genuine reassurance about the exposure risks rather than just empty words. So we're talking vaccine or perceived low infection rates. We're seeing the removal of what could be redundant regulatory intervention by individual nation states and people working together. We need to see the valid health detection screening monitors, the sustaining aviation businesses in the interim, and then the recovery of GDP. Just on a slightly positive note, the industry has seen something like this before in terms of SARS and MERS and so on, but it's never been this bad, and it's never been this global. So this is just a quick summary of the situation as of the 16th of October. And you can understand in travel across Europe between nearly 500 million people spread around that region, that the difficulty you inherently have in traveling between those individual nation states when you have levels of infection that are substantiated as being at that level. And it's had a devastating effect on European passenger traffic. So if you look at the blue background, that's showing you what the pattern of airport passenger traffic was all the way across the European airports in 2019. And you can see the reduction that's taken place going all the way down to the most recent figures, talking about 72% down. So that's basically 3/4 below a level that people were expecting to be the base for a 3, 4, 5% or so annual growth this year. So you can see the absolute devastation that has caused to the industry. And even though there has been a period of marginal recovery during the summer, clearly with the second wave that's coming through, that impact is being seen in aviation as well. The slide seems, there we go. From one of our databases, we track the number of completed flights. So one of the things we found with this crisis is that schedule information is becoming very unmanageable in terms of stated schedules, which then aren't flown or some are cancelled and so on and so forth. So what we're talking about here with this graphic is the green line is showing the actual flights that were carried out worldwide, and you're seeing since the beginning of January, where the number of flights was around 100,000 or so, down to a level of around 40 to 50,000. So getting down towards about a half of the level seen at the beginning of the year. In addition to which, there are a number of flights that were scheduled and then cancelled at the last moment. So you see those in red, and those indicate the scale of cancellations. So that's been up to 30% or so of flights cancelled. If we look at the single aisle fleet and the twin aisle fleet, then you can see in terms again of the flight tracking that the single aisle aircraft that are generally used on regional routes have had slightly better performance in terms of recovery than the wide body. And so if you look at the number that were tracked on the 3rd of January, you had something like 14,000 flights, of which we're now talking about 9,800 aircraft being tracked. And for wide bodies, you're talking about 4,000 on the 3rd January, and now only having around 1,900. On the other hand, it's important to notice that the efficiency the aircraft have built up over the years is impacted significantly by this. So in other words, you see the level of utilization, the flying hours per aircraft per day, have actually been hit as well, so that that level of recovery of flights is to some extent exaggeration of the ability of the airlines to run an efficient system, so that you see that the level of twin aisles down on average 24% since the start of the year. So you were seeing 13, 14 hours a day being flown by wide bodies. Now you're seeing around 10 hours a day. So obviously that has a significant impact in terms of the efficiency and the cost of the airline operations. For the narrow body, you've seen it dropping from around 9 to around 7 per year. So there's been two effects, one of which is the flights are reduced, and secondly, the number of hours the aircraft are utilised per day has gone down. There's a long story to be told about the number of airlines that have gone bankrupt as a result of the crisis, but at the moment our monitoring is showing around 56, with none added to it this week, but clearly a whole lot are teetering towards the edge as well. So that is a very significant number of airlines, and as you can see, a very significant number of aircraft associated with those airlines, getting on for 1,400 aircraft. So this just shows the different types of aircraft that have been impacted as a result of that. And it impacts both, obviously, the aircraft in service or on storage, or the number of aircraft that are on order, because that has an impact for the manufacturers. If we look at the lessors impacted, and from the last time that we did this analysis, we're showing clearly is a very significant number of aircraft, up to 60, right the way across the lessor fraternity, so that there are significant problems for those lessors as a result of the bankruptcies that are in train. Now, one of the other things is, well, how has it impacted aircraft values and aircraft lease changes? Given the volatility of the process, we tend probably to lag, in our opinion, of the decline that's been seen, simply because we want to get factual evidence before coming to conclusions about the drop in lease rates. But the story is really poor insofar as you're seeing 30%, 25%, 20% reduction in lease rates, which I suppose is no more than an articulation of the situation of supply and demand in the current market. We've generated a number of scenarios, and again, we are talking about these as scenarios, certainly not forecasts, because nobody has the information to understand those parameters in terms of whether we're talking research in vaccines or the restoration of confidence of people within travel. But one way or another, we have created these three scenarios, and at the moment our tracking and monitoring of what's going on seems to suggest more this scenario 4 of talking about demand recovery to 2019 levels by around late 2024 or early 2025. And that seems to be the kind of view that is emerging as well from IATA and Airbus and Boeing. And again, there has to be an element of caution in this, because things could be worse than it, things could be better. So our overview on it is that we have to keep monitoring and looking at all the different statistics right the way on the demand side, the supply side, to understand exactly how these jigsaw pieces are going to be fitting together. So if we're looking at those in terms of the way the revenue passenger kilometres recover, this is the scenario 4 on the right-hand side. We haven't yet broken it down into all the other ones, but you can see how the other ones which were looking at a kind of snapback for 6 months or a year, inevitably because of the second wave and the increasing concerns, the impact on GDP, are certainly making sure that it's going to be out towards 2023, 2024 before we're likely to be getting back to the level that you saw in 2019. And again, structurally, it's very likely there's going to be a different pattern of demand insofar as it's likely that wide-body travel and long-distance travel will take longer because of the consolidation of passengers from different origins and destinations that takes place through that long-haul hub network. And again, within individual areas like North America, like Europe, to some extent within Asia, certainly within China, that is more a controllable phenomenon, so it's likely recovery will take place sooner there. So just to sum up, it has been, and the word is catastrophic, impact on the air travel industry, resulting in that loss of demand, uncertainty, supply disruption that is extending out to 2024 and potentially beyond. The detection and immunization are still key parameters to address, and those simply have uncertain timelines. The multilateral approach is essential for a global industry that's trying to recover. And it's not just the air transport industry looking after itself. Air transport exists because it provides a service to travel and tourism. So you're talking about hotel networks, you're talking about car hire networks, you're talking about attractions, you're talking about business travel. All of these different elements feed off from air transport. One of the big issues has obviously been asset redundancy and underutilization, and that problem is going to take years to resolve, and it's going to impact both the manufacturers and suppliers. The knock-on effects on GDP growth are going to reduce the underlying air travel and tourism demand for an uncertain period until we see that work its way through. The recovery, we believe, will come in time, but there are going to be shocks to certain markets that could take much longer to be accommodated. So finally, we're likely to see a substantial realignment of travel industry companies, including airlines, inevitable due to the financial impact of the crisis. So with that, I'll hand back to Frederico.
Thank you, Peter. We are a little bit more thoughtful after this presentation. I'm going to present my second guest on the panel, Eddy Pieniazek. He's head of analytics and advisor at Ishka. Eddy has supported thousands of aircraft transactions during this last 35 years career, advising leaders of the world on top aviation finance, investment and leasing, companies, airlines and manufacturers. Eddy, as head of advisory at Ishka Global, is responsible for the content and advisory service delivered by Ishka, covering airlines and asset risk, valuations and consulting projects. A respected and valued influencer, Eddy is one of the original pioneers of today's aircraft valuation and appraisal industry, developing the industry first online valuation tool and associated analytics, fulfilling the rigor and consistency demanded by investors. Eddy, thank you very much to be present on this panel. We all received your newsletters. I'm talking about me, but I'm also know the owners and lessors of aircraft and airline managers are receiving much more complex information, and they must be with their hands in their head, thinking, what's the way forward? Do they call you? What do they ask you? What do they say? When is this stopping?
Yeah, I think a lot of people need counselling rather than calling me at the moment, just in terms of understanding the market. Thank you, Frederico, and thanks, Peter, for some somber data, but real data. This is really where we're at in the marketplace. I mean, you've mentioned already, lease rates having come down. We're seeing sort of 15 to 40% decreases now. If we go back to the period of, post 9/11 and SARS, I mean, we saw numbers of 25 to 50% decreases. So I would say we're not quite there yet as far as, lease rates go and asset values. And in terms of the excess aircraft, again, there are thousands of aircraft that are effectively spare today, and next year we still think there'll be 5,000 narrow bodies spare, coming down to about 1,000 or 2,000 in 22. So gradually recovering as traffic recovers, and as we hope traffic recovers. And again, we've done our own scenario modeling, and we're looking to 23, 24, 25 as being a period when that excess capacity starts to get used up. And I guess one of the other big things that we should be looking out for is the kind of state support that the airlines have been getting. There's about 133 billion provided by the states now in terms of equity injections or loan guarantees, and there's another 28 billion that's currently being discussed. So this is a lot of support that the airlines have been getting. But I guess the question is, can the airlines sustain these debt levels? And these have been, short-term solutions to what was perceived as a short-term problem. And I think the new problem will be is if the short-term problem becomes a longer-term problem. And I think that's where we're at today in terms of how the airlines get through the winter. So that's the one side of the coin. And I think somewhere in our discussion we need to talk about opportunity.
Yes.
So maybe
you have a bottle of champagne behind you, so that means that you are looking forward to open it, to pop it up. Huh?
Well, the champagne is for when I see the next lease rate going up. So we'll know we've passed the bottom then. So hopefully it's not too. I can put it in the fridge and it can chill for the near term. But yes, in terms of opportunity, I mean, there's a lot of people who are invested today who obviously have got their challenges. But there have been people who've been keeping money aside, waiting for an opportunity for the market to become disruptive and maybe a chance to step in. There are entrepreneurs and visionaries out there. We see them appear at times like this. We've seen Ryanair come to the fore, buying aircraft at a good price when the markets were depressed. And I expect we'll see that kind of stimulation again happening with people appearing who are going to launch new business plans, new opportunities once we get maybe a clearer perspective of how the markets will recover. So I think there's going to be opportunity for new startups. I mean, their benefit is they have a clean sheet of paper. They're not carrying debt in the same sense, and maybe they're probably going to be more agile and able to respond. But also with asset prices being down and lease rates down, that's another opportunity for airlines to upgrade their fleets. If they've got older aircraft in their fleets, this could be a good time to start to refleet and upgrade their systems. And again, that's something that's going to probably happen over the coming years. And I guess other opportunities is on the freight side. This may be mentioned in the past. Some freight programs will be stimulated or encouraged by the fact that some of the feedstocks, some of the aircraft types are now at a price that makes their conversion much more economically viable. And a downturn like this tends to accelerate those new programs. So I mean, we're seeing the A321 freighter conversion program. There's talk of the 777 freighter conversion program. So there's opportunities like that are appearing in the marketplace. And again, it's probably a time when we start to see some new tech coming on board as well from the aircraft and the asset perspective. A lot of aircraft types will have their economic lives extended by this period because there's lower production rates and lower numbers of new aircraft coming into play. But it's also an opportunity to create new models and think about getting the next efficiency level provided into the marketplace. So we see quite a few things that people will start to turn to and look at in terms of the opportunity side of the market, notwithstanding that the incumbents already have their challenges.
It's interesting, one of the aspects that you mentioned, and we also follow by information by Ishka Global, is the amount of money that are being deployed by governments into airlines. Which area of the globe is that you are seeing most prominence? Is it America, Europe? And what will happen to those airlines in the future? I mean, we don't have a crystal ball, but as you said, the smaller ones will be much more agile than those ones that will carry huge tons of debt. Will they be nationalized in the future?
I think there's a possibility that there's going to be a lot of consolidation. I mean, a lot of the support, the subsidy, I think I mentioned 133 billion. I think 58 of that was in the US. And of the 27 that is in the pipeline. I think maybe 20 is also aiming at the US. So the US has got its support there, but it's coming at a price, and the price is whether those airlines can carry that debt going forwards. But yeah, I mean, in Europe, you've got maybe 150 carriers, and that's probably too many relative to, say, if you take the US market as an example. So we can expect to see some consolidation, and whether that's done at a state level, with state input, or whether it's done just through the market itself, I think that's still to play out. But I think we will see some consolidation.
I'm curious to ask you about the Portuguese and Brazilian situation, but I will leave that to the next question. I want to present also my good friend Peter. Peter, I could not find your bio, so I will need you to introduce yourself. I know you very much, and thank you for being awake this time. And you are in Hong Kong. It's a very difficult place, and now also for aviation with all these announcements that we are seeing. I know that you were involved in sort of big business there, and now you are seeing probably most of your clients, not knowing which course to have. First, present yourself, and if you can answer my question.
Sure. Thank you very much, Frederico, for having me on the panel. Very interesting discussion. So my name is Peter Huijbers. I'm a director of PH Aviation Asia. My company is advising on aircraft procurement, financing, aircraft leasing, and also doing some fleet management for airlines in the area. Yes, it has been very exciting. Sort of the news here in Hong Kong yesterday and today was not positive. But having said that, if you sort of look on a higher flight level, the bigger picture, Asia is, in my view, an area that will recover first on travel. It has people that are eager to travel, as soon as they could, be it through travel bubbles or when quarantine requirements are being dripped, they will step on an airplane and continue with seeing friends, eating, buying rice cookers, and what have you. So it's a good place to be. What I think has changed is that a lot of capital that we typically saw here in Asia, in particular from mainland China, that had been used to finance aircraft, be it as debt or as equity, has dried up in the sense that it didn't cross the border. I think a lot of money from mainland China has actually stayed on the mainland to support the airlines and the deliveries on the mainland. So a lot of the money that at least what I see and what I would be working with is money from Europe and from North America. Part of the discussion what you and Eddy mentioned, I think some people viewed that there would be, let's say, the vulture capital markets. I don't think that is actually happening. I think that they all saw that this super distressed. I'll step in, have a great discount, and I'll leave in a year or two. That I don't see happening at all. There is maybe some values here and there, but if you have the right aircraft type, let's call it the more modern aircraft like the Neos, the A350. And you're one of those 20-25 airlines that won't tilt in the next 4 or 5 years, given that they were already in a good shape before COVID and not just have got an extra lifeline by their governments. You probably will see the same price level on transactions as before COVID in terms of pricing, lease rates that they are getting. So you definitely need a sharp pencil over there. Yeah, Asia is and remains the biggest aviation market, and we will and remain resilient. Plenty of opportunities. You just need cash. Cash is king as always. I'm not as somber. People want to go back on an airplane. They want to travel. We just need to get our governments to support. With quick and cheap testing. It's nice to have a travel bubble between Hong Kong and Singapore, but if you spend more money on 4 tests each trip than you spend actually on a ticket, people will think twice.
Yes.
So.
Definitely, you are sitting in such an exciting market, and we could see, and correct me if I'm wrong, from the movement on the last 10 years, it was we saw huge lessors coming from everywhere in the world, but huge support from Chinese banks, right? Yep. And curiously, last year we saw this trend of these lessors to start to trade their aircraft. And right, this was about last year. I mean, I was in Hong Kong last year, and I saw that the word was trade. Let's trade, because everyone was speculating why. And then suddenly this happened, and you just said us that the tendency is the market to be closed, the capital to be closed in China. So there is no more interest on China and government funds to finance this industry, because they are just looking at themselves and trying to understand what's happening, or this is just sortigato.
I think it's like a little bit wait and see. Of course, the let's call it the first generation of aircraft lessors in China, having bigger portfolios. In the beginning, the message was grow, grow, grow. So you don't sell, because with that you would, even if you would get a better portfolio, you would have a smaller portfolio, and of course that doesn't work. But over time, the issue of asset management came across, and that at some stage something that goes in has to go out, and therefore those guys start trading and have successfully traded with technical teams or external support on a technical side. The younger lessors, the in-betweens, as I would say, they probably were caught on the wrong foot, in the sense that they bought a lot of aircraft then at the good time, today in hindsight at the wrong time. They can't sell, given that nobody is going to pay the trading prices that they would need. They made concessions that people at the time had to do to make the deal, but today you just can't afford it. So I think they are people that need definitely the financial lifeline, and they don't trade and just may consolidate. At least that's my personal view. So I think there is a little bit of shaking around in terms of what can be done on the mainland. But those that have international representation, and there's quite a few mainland lessors that are here in Hong Kong, they do normal business.
Peter, I will ask you now to come to discussion. Let's bring it a little bit to the airline operation and management. What should airlines do? Should they reduce everything to the skeleton and survive, or start to take this amount of debt and take some risks and start flying some empty aircraft? What do you think?
My feeling is they have to try everything. There's nothing that's off the table. Now, whether you're talking about shrinking operations, or whether you're talking postponing deliveries, or whether you're talking about giving back aircraft, all of those things have to be considered, because you can imagine the situation, any business that's losing, choose an average for the world, 75% of its business has to cut costs immediately. Otherwise, it's just going to run out of cash. So I think the question is whether or not they can actually work out that there is a path back to solvency, and it's going to be unpleasant on the way. They're going to be losing money on the way, but there is a path back. What I think you can't do is do nothing and hope, and there just simply isn't a strategy to do that. So I think absolutely everything of the various elements you mentioned have to be up for discussion. And I think what we're likely to see after this is actually an industry that is, from the passenger's point of view, is going to be more expensive and with less choice. I don't see any alternative, because it's all very well to talk about, well, it'll drive out of business the inefficient operators. In practice, actually, I think we've seen in the past, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it actually hits the people who had a really good business model, who, if they just had the opportunity to get through it, they would have survived and they would have been the most efficient operation. But it wasn't, because whether it was kind of government funding or what particular circumstances, particular routes, the element of luck certainly does come into it. But on the other hand, in the long run, you will see more efficient operations coming back in to replace less efficient operations. But you have to bear in mind the proportion of the world's airlines that do have state intervention involved. And it's not to say all of those are bad by any means, but it's just that a state isn't good at running airlines, and that's been proved time and again. And so when you've got the requirements as capital spend, the requirements of maintaining numbers of staff and things like that, and those become a source of conflict, you've got a problem running an efficient business. So bluntly, I would say everything's on the table all the way along the line, and that nothing should be ruled out.
Very interesting. So very interesting point. Situation is so dramatic that we really need to look at every exit. Eddy, some companies are really doing that, but they are still on the ground. Are they losing too much time in reorganization?
No, I mean, I guess they've got. It's just a case of liquidity, really. Do they have the cash to see them through to a point where they can start operating again? And it's as simple as that. As Peter says, there are business models which are good, but if you don't have the financial capital to get to the other side, then you're going to fall by the wayside, or there's got to be some kind of a restructuring or reorganization. I mean, we've seen quite a number of airlines now who've taken impairments on the aircraft that they're accelerating their retirement, and that's you're losing shareholder equity in the process, and it's a case of whether your shareholders and your support is going to stay with you through this particular scenario, and whether you can survive to live another day, as the saying goes, going forward. So I think of all the airlines out there, I don't think there's one set business plan for each of them. It's they've got to make their own way based upon their own situation. But it's the shareholder support is critical and key for them all.
Peter, I'm now flying to Hong Kong. Sorry.
Holland would have been fine too, being Dutch. So that
it's not good. It's not a good place to be, I believe. Now it's you need to be inside. Really, at the moment. It's a very good place to be, but you need to be inside, right? Peter, we are seeing that we have this very good message also from Eddy for the stakeholders. If Peter warns that we should look at all possible exits, Eddy is saying that stakeholders need to act, and if there is liquidity that is missing, we should act. But we are discussing off record before that you believe that the business model of airline management is also changing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I think the type of people that airlines will fly in the future, even if we get to the same level as last year in be it 24, 25, whatever, is changed. It will be a different composition, and I think therefore the way we would use airplanes to fly, be it on direct flights or through a hub, what type of cabins we would use is going to change. And probably coming back to Peter's point, if I were an airline these days, I probably would split my fleet into sort of 3 subfleets. One that I would fly, I won't say whatever, but almost whatever, get them into the air and fly. It's a core fleet to routes that you're going to serve. Then a fleet that is sort of on standby that you probably can reactivate in the next 6 to 9 months. And probably your fleet that will never make it back. That would be a deep storage fleet that you could still get back into the business if you want, but very unlikely. Because there's a great factor. A lot of airlines discontinued flying. There is slots at airports available to fly into. So as long as you have the shareholder support that Eddy mentioned and your deep pockets, this is a fantastic opportunity to change your network and get to places where you previously couldn't go given the competition. But now you can be the door opener. You can be the one that is changing the market. And there is a few examples today that are exactly doing that. So that's what I would do. And therefore this is a great time. We can actually use the time of the pandemic to change the way airlines are structured. And the Fed that we have here and there, to get rid of it, and basically retune the business model.
Very, very interesting. So getting back, there's so many questions that I wanted to do. I know the time is very limited, and I want to also focus a little bit on the general questions, because there is a lot of audience that is listening to us on the channel and also on the recordings. And I want to ask two things, Peter. Peter Morris, will the hub and spoke model disappear, or are we going to start to flying direct? Or the superconnectors will still be alive after all this drama in 2024?
The answer will be down to everything from the cost efficiency through to the products and prices that are put in the market. That's what will determine it. It wasn't magic that the so-called low-cost carriers arose first in North America and then in Europe, then in Asia. It was because they went through, made the efficiency gains, passed that on to the customer, and the customer said, that's the price I like. So the same thing will apply again. The problem here is that this is an industry that has continually been based on the economies of scale. So in other words, pushing up the load factor from around 2/3 to around 80%, 80% plus, had a very significant effect on the cost efficiency and the pricing efficiency of those airlines. Then internet distributions had reduced that cost that used to be 25% the ticket price down to about 1 or 2%. So there have been amazing efficiency gains. So the actual future will be determined by who gets the right product at the right price. It's the same model in a different way. It's just that there's nothing magic about the airline business. You have the right product at the right price, people buy it. And so it's the people that can manage to construct that, and whether that includes moving through hubs or going point to point, that will be determined by the cost efficiency and the price that's put through to people. I mean, the efficiency of the Emirates model, for example, was determined by the ability to connect together a huge number of points in Europe, 50, 60 points in Europe, to a network to Africa, to Asia, to Australasia, that couldn't be created by any single individual operator in Germany or France or the UK and so on. So it's that economies of scale that they managed with that particular aircraft at that particular time that made that successful. And that won't go away, because if people still want to travel from Europe to Australia to China and so on, then routing via the Middle East is a feasible thing to do at a particular price. And if they manage to discount compared with the people that are flying direct, then they will divert traffic to that. And the key thing is that hub and spoke model isn't just the airlines thought it was a good idea, so they did. It's because of the cost efficiency that it brings. And if they can still provide that cost efficiency, then it will carry on working. The problem will be if there are massive interruptions on long haul travel, like people from Africa aren't allowed to go on to Europe because of this health issue, or people from the Philippines aren't allowed to transit through Hong Kong because of, once you get all these barriers start to come up, it just reduces the efficiency of the whole network that, as I say, always stimulated itself on the basis of economies of scale. And you can see at the moment, the problem we've got is that there are too many flights being flown for the number of passengers with low load factors and low utilization. So the spiral that went upwards and improved all the time has gone into reverse, and we've got to get back there.
Very interesting. So very chaotic. We need artificial intelligence to start to solve all that. Eddy, the people on the other side, I know that they were going to love this question, but the tickets are still expensive. So what's happening? Eddy, this is for you.
Sorry, what was the question?
People are still finding tickets expensive. Will this be a tendency?
I'm not sure. I haven't been looking for a ticket for a little while, but I guess tickets have to be expensive because airlines have to cover their costs at the moment, and that again, as I think as Peter mentioned, that's a spiral that doesn't really help the airline situation, because you need the load factors and you need the yields. So I think that's just a process we're having to go through for the next short term, while airlines can work out how to manage that process and getting people back on board.
If I can add on that subject, Frederico, we all stop buying T-shirts for €5 or €10 because we think this is not good. No, we need to support a better way of manufacturing those. Why don't we spend more money on the airplane tickets? Tickets have been way too cheap, at least in some cases. So I think we as an industry need to do more to demonstrate why ticket prices are the way they are, and that even that it is for us as a passenger to pay, that it is actually something good to do for the larger economy.
But this is kind of a mouse and the cat question. We want more people to get in, and now we're talking about that maybe we're going back to the golden ages of aviation, where we all wear a suit and everybody was in the aircraft. What will happen with the tourists and the backpack travelers, Eddy? Will they come back very shortly, or do you think that the high price that companies needs to pay to lessors, to debtors, to pay the current operation will be a trend that will stay for a long time? Yes. Okay, so very quick, that right now? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Eddy. Thank you, Peter, also in London, Peter Morris. All the best, and I see you very soon, personally.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cool.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Take care. Stay healthy.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.